Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack. Time for a concept idea. Today I have for you Active Combat Support Module and Activatable Fleet-wide Abilities. With this idea, I would like to suggest something that I've always thought about being in VEGA, but never quite seen, and that is abilities that are enabled and can be activated in combat after a module has been built and upgraded. One suggested ability means you could enable warp in a fight for currently selected ships and designate jump location in the combat field via feeding all selected ships jump drive cores coordinates for a short-range tactical jump. Ships would have to turn to face the jump location first though, but would maintain their current facing upon arriving after the warp. The warp in combat would behave as it does out of combat with a short warm-up time of 5 seconds, and naturally only ships in live space, not face space, would be able to warp like this. So Pharmacon ships could warp if they timed it, but normal ships without phasing would be more ideal for this jump. And the warping stats that I have come up with are, well, my suggestions. I want all of you to go ahead and just suggest what you want as well, because these are all ideas that we bounce around. But mine is a 5-second warm-up time after selected ships turn to face the jump destination. Only selected ships at the activation of the ability will jump to the designated location. 55-second cooldown timer to limit number of uses in combat and put more focus on when you should use a given ability instead of just spamming it to give yourself an advantage in combat. Another ability I had thought of is to disrupt combat in some way, and it would be to deploy 2 shield wall pylons that are linked. They would be locked to within a set placement of one another to ensure a player does not cut the playing field in half, which they possibly could if it wasn't limited. The wall would be on a duration time and a cooldown timer. The cooldown timer would activate once the duration timer ends. The thought behind this one is to give the players access to a deployable similar to the following idea that would allow for partial control of the battlefield. The wall can be ignored with warp. However, it does block movement while in phase as it would normally, so you just can't go through it. You can't shoot through it, you have to go around it. And the stats that I have suggested for it are actually fairly straightforward as well. 10-second duration time with no initial setup time. Though the pylons can be destroyed by being fired upon, the pylons only have 6,500 hit points with my suggestion. The distance between the pylons cannot be greater than 7,500 meters, which is around the typical range that a destroyer can fire at. And it will be set to a 50-second cooldown timer to again limit the number of uses in combat and put more emphasis on when you should use the ability instead of just randomly spamming it to have an advantage. And the third ability I have thought of at the moment is a deployable beam turret module at a designated location in the live combat area. Odd, right? A combat module in fleet versus fleet combat. Well, no. It won't be overpowered, but it will hurt if you ignore it. But just like the previous deployable idea, it will have a set duration, cooldown between uses, and hit points. It will also have a DPS value that won't really mean much. Its main feature will be debuffs. Debuffs in the form of a little bit of stasis, some counter-appletive regen, lowered shield recharge, and reduced phase charge, countering just about every single defense type in the game currently. Now, I do think after you activate the ability, you should be able to reactivate the ability while it's active to designate a target for it within its range, so it will focus fire on that one ship so you can single out any single one you want. The stat suggestions for the third ability are as follows for what I have come up with, and again, just like the previous two, I would like you to suggest your own changes and things like that. A 15-second duration to ensure that it can do something to help you out in combat. Unless it just dies instantly upon being spawned, that can happen too. Debuff module health will have 4,500 is what I currently have thought of. Yeah, it's a little squishy, it has no shields and could explode just by being sneezed at, especially with the damage per second of most ships nowadays. So be sure to use it when you have a good chance of making use of it. The range of the beam will be 7,500 meters. Mad that it can debuff a destroyer but not a carrier due to the range. Well, this is just a suggestion meant for all of you to share feedback on, and since it has no limitation of where you can deploy it, you could drop it right on top of a carrier if you wanted to. The damage, it will only do 500 energy damage per firing cycle, so its damage is set to 500 and it deals energy. The beam firing cycles are a 1 second charge up time, a 4 second firing time, and then it will go back into the charge time, so it will stop after 4 seconds and charge up again. And to that I say, did you expect it to fire for longer? Because if so, it could have, but that would have been useless against weapons and things that reactively prevent beam weapons from firing. And the debuffs that I have thought of for this portion of the idea are 25% stasis, a negative of 5% to the ablative recovery, a positive value of a plus 5% to the damage you need to activate ablative recovery, minus 5% to the current shield regeneration value. Current value is the amount of the shields that are generated per second, which means that the current value is always going to be mixed with fleet commanders and things like that as the game moves forward, so it takes the live current value in combat and debuffs that. 5% to the current phase charge value. And the debuffs, as a few people in Discord had mentioned, they may need to be tuned up a bit or tuned into different focuses, such as shortening damage per second burst, things like that for the ships and other things that could be an issue in the long run. Finally, a 45-second cooldown duration to enable it to be used as often as the other abilities, but be more impactful without actually dealing much damage. And naturally, I only want to add abilities that enable new tactics and strategies moving forwards with the game through this concept idea. I don't want to add something that, you know, it shuts down an entire ship completely to where it's completely irrelevant. I don't want to do that. But I do want to add tactics that we can use other than just ship-to-ship combat. Give me a second, need to get some water, and then I'm going to just read through one of the suggested abilities that Kyrian from the Discord had suggested. And yes, I had to go back through to find it, Kyrian, so if you're wondering where I got the thing from at the time, I didn't save it when you actually talked about it, but I did save most of your comments right here this time around. So, the first question they asked was, what about Allure ability? When activated, it creates a visual copy of ships that activate the ability. The ship has visually all the attributes of the original ship, but its real stats should be something along these parameters. Then they suggested that it should be a copy of a bit of the hit points that serves as a temporary mute shield in PvP, but not too much and less than the maximum hit point of the base ship. The copy shouldn't be able to fire and instead should act as a decoy in PvE. So in PvE, it will just sit still, essentially, and tank a little bit of damage. Now, the next thing they said was, I have two designs in mind on how it would work. Pardon me real quick while I yawn. Ugh. It's just getting to me. Alright, the first one they suggested was, when activated, the ability cloaks the original ship and spawns the copy in its place. The ship remains cloaked until the copy is destroyed or its timer expires. This version should have a rather short lifetime, 5 or 10 seconds, and not as much hit points, 5 or 10% of the base ship's maximum health. So the easiest way to look at that is if it has 1,000 hit points, it would be either 50 or 100 hit points. So it could die extremely easily. The second suggestion is, the copy spawns in front of the base ship and jams the weapons of nearby enemy ships, like the gargoyle does during a second only. Well, it actually disrupts their firing, so the cycle, it just quickly breaks it, so if it's being hit with beam weapons, it would disable them. In order to make the copy as a new target, as the new target, okay, so I over-explained the second portion before they got to it, but the rest of it goes as, In PvP, you would have to manually target the base ship again if you want to fire at it again. This version could allow for a longer health pool, maybe 10% or 20% of the base ship's maximum health, and act as a pure meat shield for the average amount of time, 20 seconds. Ugh. Yet again, sleep's just creeping up on me. It's not even that late for a change. I'm not recording like the dead of the night. Granted, this is after midnight. It's like 2 a.m. right now, but it's not as late as when I normally record. Also, the ambient temperature is just drying me out. Okay, time for the stats that they suggested. Kyrian suggested the hit point stats be 10% of the maximum health of the selected ship at the time of the activation of the ability. The defense, although the copy will be shown to have the same remaining defense that the base ship had, it possesses no shield, shell screens, or any ablative armor. It is essentially just a meat shield. It only has health. Resistances. The copy keeps all the resistances of the selected ship, excluding temporary bonuses coming from overdrives, carrier fields that affect any other types of ships, and things like that. The armament, the copy is shown to have the same firing arc and range that the primary ship had, but it does not fire. Other ship stats, the copy has the same stats as the original ship, but cannot activate overdrives or any other abilities such as spawning ships. Lifetime. The copy has a 10-second lifetime. It can be destroyed earlier though. Cooldown. This ability has a 75-second cooldown to prevent it from saving a ship's life more than once in most cases. And I forgot to mention, the selected ship remains invisible and untargetable until the copy has expired or has been destroyed. The cooldown can be reduced to 50 seconds, but in that case you need to have a restriction like this ability can only be used once per ship and once per combat. Or have a longer cooldown for the ship that just used it. And to that I actually will lay out a quick thought. With how you laid it out with all the health values and everything like that, it would work out with a 50-second cooldown and a 10-second lifetime because you'd be able to use it just as often as the abilities I suggested. But it wouldn't be overpowered because it's not adding to the damage, it's essentially resetting combat. And that is the concept idea for today, everybody. Well, the first of the two. We'll see what the next one bears later today. But for now, everybody, be safe out in the void, happy hunting, and as always, I will see you in the next video.